First and foremost, I'm coming from my own experience of being in the classroom for quite a while, and knowing that when students come into the classroom stressed, whether it's a fight with a parent or someone on the playground, or they're experiencing homelessness or poverty or even trauma, when they come into the classroom and they're stressed, part of their brain is the thinking part of their brain is essentially shutting down. It's not firing as well and not working for them. And so from my own experience in the classroom and from knowing what research tells us, and if you talk to any teacher, they'll say for some reason more and more students are showing up in the classroom and having higher levels of stress and anxiety, and the research backs this up. And there's more of a focus, thankfully, on well-being in our educational system, in classrooms, in higher education, because there's now this recognition that when kids are stressed, they can't learn and they don't have overall well-being. So this book was in response to that, and mindfulness is something that I brought into my own teaching when I was in an elementary school, and it's something that is part of every one of my teacher education classes. It has been for a number of years. I get the most response around mindfulness from teacher candidates who are doing it themselves and taking care of themselves, but also going into the classroom and bringing mindfulness practices to their students and noticing the difference that it can make. So this book is in response to that. I've been doing workshops for teachers and for parents and administrators and teacher educators and teacher candidates, and all of those groups of people asking me, do you have a resource? I'm bringing different activities and lessons, and do you have something that has it all in one place? And so I didn't, and I thought, well, I'll put something together so that it's accessible for those who are interested. Having been a teacher, I know that kids are stressed, and we can make the best lesson plans with all the bells and whistles and do all the things that will be engaging to many students, but not all. And those some of the students that don't respond could be, and oftentimes it's if they're in a state of stress and they just aren't engaged, they're not able to pay attention. We call it their thinking brain just isn't working as well because their stress response is activated, their amygdala. And so I write about in the book Dante, who really represents a number of the students that I had. Like many of the students I had, very spirited, beautiful students, lots of energy, but not able to pay attention, having a hard time sitting down. He talked a lot about thoughts in his head, just constantly having thoughts in his head and not being able to focus. And so brought mindfulness to him and my other students, and initially there's sort of a response in terms of what's this? It's so new and different and very novel for them, but really quickly saw the difference it made for Dante and the rest of my students in helping them to really settle down, and for some of them calming down in a way that they just hadn't tapped into those experiences before, to have these moments of just stillness. And especially in today's world where we have this, we're competing for students' attention with their use of digital technology. So many of them don't have the opportunity just to have these moments of stillness and presence. So I noticed the difference it made for my students in the classroom. I noticed the difference it made for me as the teacher in the classroom, and it eventually, and it didn't take very long, it became something that students would ask for. Can we have a peace moment? Can we have a moment of silence? Can we have a moment of mindfulness or mindful breathing or whatever it was? And I've heard that story over and over again from teachers who do bring mindfulness into their teaching, so it's pretty heartening. I don't want it to be mistaken as a behavior management tool, because that's not its intention, that's not what it's for. It's really to help kids tap into presence and being in the moment, and also being able to sort of calm and soothe themselves when it's necessary, but really just to get out of their minds, because in the research, there was a recent Harvard study that showed that our minds wander 47% of the time. If students experience stress and are having, they're in a state of chronic stress and it's obvious to us as teachers, fantastic, but also for students who may not look as though they need this kind of activity and to learn how to do mindfulness, it's going to support everyone. And I really see it as a skill set. It helps to build, to support learning, to support presence, to support resilience, and their ability to deal with stress, because life is challenging. And so when confronted with really difficult emotions, fear, anxiety, stress, anger, it gives kids an opportunity to sort of tap into recognizing what they're feeling, name their emotions, and then respond more thoughtfully. And the research shows when kids are able to name their emotions and locate it in their bodies, then they can respond more thoughtfully and feel like they're in more control. And that's so helpful for students to feel like they have some control, especially for our students who don't have a lot of control with what's happening in their lives. In this book, I talk about, in part, it's just part of it, but how do we give students the tools they need? How do we teach them the skills they need in order to manage their attention, which we know is primary and important for learning. We often don't, we ask students to pay attention, but we don't teach them how to do that better. So in this book, and mindfulness, the research shows that mindfulness helps our students learn how to direct their attention where they want it to be and keep it there. It helps them to learn how to manage their emotions, so to recognize, name, and manage their emotions, especially when they're difficult emotions. And it helps them to thoughtfully respond to some of their impulses, and so to be aware of some of their reactions. And so that's the behavior piece. Ross Greene, who wrote a wonderful book called The Explosive Child, says that oftentimes when kids have behavioral challenges, it's a result of an unmet need or lagging skill. So sometimes kids are not, sometimes they are, but sometimes they are not in control of their responses. They have impulses and then they react in the classroom, and it manifests as a behavioral challenge. Sometimes it's coming out of fear, or not knowing what they're supposed to be doing, or trying to distract you from the fact that they are not doing well in school. There are a number of reasons why kids will have behavioral challenges. Why I said that I don't want mindfulness to be seen as a behavioral management tool. I mean, here's an example. I went in to observe a 5th grade teacher, wonderful, fantastic, experienced teacher who was learning to bring mindfulness into her class. She had been doing mindfulness practice herself and brought some mindfulness strategies to her students. So when I walked into the classroom, it was clear that, and this, I know this from being a teacher, there was one of those moments where just students were off task for whatever reason. And she said, you know, I can see that you're getting a little bit out of control, and I think it's time that we have a mindfulness practice. And some of the students you could see were, got ready for the mindfulness practice, but then I could see that there was eye rolling in the classroom. And so I think what was happening there was that she was using it as a punitive tool. She could see that the kids were getting out of control, and she was saying, basically sending the message, your behavior isn't what it should be, so now we're going to do a mindfulness practice, almost like a response to their behavior. And so we chatted afterwards, and I said, you can bring mindfulness to your students as a response. The thing is, the more we do mindfulness with practice with students, the fewer behavioral challenges we do see, because they learn how to respond and to manage their own behaviors and their emotions. But I said, if you frame it in a different way, if you say, I'm noticing that you're getting off task and some of you are distracted, so why don't we try a mindfulness practice that will help you to pay better attention and to get you on task so that you can be learning. So offering it as an opportunity for them to self-regulate and manage their attention, rather than saying, you've misbehaved and so now we're going to do a mindfulness practice. We never want to see it in response to that, and how we offer it to students often sort of shapes how they respond to mindfulness, and so we have to be so careful about that. But a byproduct of mindfulness is that it does help the classroom become a lot more calm, and students are more able to manage their impulses in more socially appropriate ways. Students don't often think about their breath in a conscious way. It's for most of us, not all of us, but for almost all of us, we are able to breathe without thinking about it at all. It just sort of happens. But it's helpful to introduce students to being able to consciously manipulate your breath and focus on your breath and get aware of your breathing pattern. And there are different activities for different age students. When you start to do a mindfulness practice, they're aware of their breath in a way that they may not have been aware of it before. So one of a favorite mindfulness practice for many people is the mind jar, or it's sometimes called a calming jar, and it's made with water and glycerin and sparkles. A classroom can have just a section of the classroom where there are some tools that students can use to go self-regulate, and that's one of the tools that oftentimes teachers will put in their peace corner, so that students, when they're agitated, when they're upset, if they're angry, they can be invited to go into the peace corner and use some of the tools that they've already been introduced to sort of calm themselves down. And usually it takes just a couple of minutes, and then they can come back to the classroom and join in on the learning or the activities that's happening. I know that when I was in the classroom, I appreciated having resources that gave me descriptions of what I could do, that gave me reproducible templates. So there's lots of templates in the book. There are some guiding scripts for teachers to use. There are templates that teachers can use for example, I have a gratitude journal, gratitude cards, cootie catcher for them playing, so they can have some different mindfulness activities on that. In the book there are one of the sections is on mindful movement and some yoga poses, and then visuals of yoga poses. So the book really has templates, it has visuals, and I'm really excited that it has the voices of teachers from the classroom talking about their experiences of bringing in particular strategies and how that unfolded in the classroom. And so their voices, images from the classroom. So I've tried to make it very user-friendly. There's step-by-step ways to bring in some strategies. And I would say a piece of advice that I have for teachers is that if they're new to mindfulness and new to bringing mindfulness into their classroom, I would suggest that they start with their own practice. And for two reasons. One, because the most powerful mindfulness strategy you can bring into your classroom actually is your own mindfulness practice, because if you are calm, if you are feeling present, there's going to be a ripple effect in the classroom and your students will know it. And I read one recent study that said that teachers experience the highest level of daily stress of any occupational position, matching nurses and higher than physicians. So teachers experience a lot of stress, and we have to engage in self-care. And I often like to talk about the analogy, if anyone has had the opportunity to fly, they'll often tell you to put your oxygen mask on yourself first before doing that for someone else. So as teachers, we need to put that oxygen mask on first and engage in self-care. And mindfulness is one of those ways. Another reason for having your own practice, or perhaps if you're new to practice, engaging in a mindfulness practice along with your students, is so that you can have an embodied experience of what it's like to engage in mindfulness practice and some of the inevitable challenges and benefits of mindfulness, so that your students will know that you have experienced those too, and you can be in conversation with them about that. But I would say start there, and there are some strategies in the book for teachers to start their own practice if they don't already have one. If someone is new to bringing mindfulness, if this is their first time bringing it into the classroom, the first 3 chapters is sort of a way to introduce some of the lessons and strategies you can bring to your students to introduce the concept of mindfulness. If you have already brought mindfulness into the classroom, you can pull from the different chapters of the book to find out what's meaningful to you. There's mindful breathing, mindful listening, mindful movement, guided mindfulness practices. There's a section on mindfulness of emotions that give teachers opportunities to teach social and emotional awareness and different fun practices. That's kind of a hallmark of the book. I want them to be fun and engaging activities for students and for teachers as well. And there's a chapter on the Peace Corner if teachers are interested in bringing that into their classroom, how to set that up, examples of what it would look like, stories from teachers about how they brought the Peace Corner into their classroom. So my hope is that teachers will find it to be a user-friendly book written from someone who was and is a teacher, so has that experience of bringing mindfulness to students, who's practiced herself, and then is providing a resource that hopefully I think that teachers will find valuable, that they don't have to go looking for resources elsewhere, that most of the resources are in the book in terms of descriptions, in terms of guiding scripts, in terms of templates they can photocopy, activity sheets for students, and that sort of thing.
Amazing.